How I Met Your Mother TV series review. So this is part of what I've been calling my television addiction series, which is a series of videos I've been making sorting through a period of my life from 2011 to 2013 when I was watching way too much TV because I was living in Cambodia and had access to a lot of pirated DVDs at the time. For more information on what this is or why I'm doing this, you can check out the video I made introducing this series, which I'll link to in the description down below. But we're up to How I Met Your Mother now. And yes, How I Met Your Mother. So this is a show that was very popular in its day. I'm not sure people are still rewatching it now as much as they used to, but we'll talk about that in a minute. I was late to the party in discovering this show. It first came out in 2005, and I didn't hear about it because I was living in Japan at the time. You know, especially back in 2005, the internet then isn't quite what it is now. No YouTube in 2005, no Facebook, or at least not widespread. So you didn't quite hear about these things, and yet I started hearing bits and pieces of it through the grapevine or various references to it and this or that. I was confused, as you would be if you just, all I knew it was a show called How I Met Your Mother. And that title, well, the title does do a pretty good job of encapsulating what the show is about, but if all you have is the title, it's pretty hard to imagine what the rest of the show could be about. I started getting hints that this show was quite popular, but didn't really know much else than that. And then in 2010, I went to Melbourne, Australia to do a graduate degree. And while I was doing my master's program there, I was hanging out and living with a bunch of undergrads in a student dormitory and began to get a sense of just how popular this show had become with people in that age range, people 18 to 22. They loved the show. They would watch it all the time. I never really saw it back then, or maybe I saw glimpses and pieces of it, but I never really saw it in bulk. And then I came to Cambodia. Now, this actually ties in quite well with the theme of this series, which is television addiction. And in the beginning video to this series, I gave some background about how I was watching way too much TV and all the cheap DVDs in Cambodia. But a little piece of that background that I neglected to say in the first video was the first several months I was in Cambodia, I didn't actually have a DVD player set up at my apartment. They were cheap enough to get, but I didn't get one because I didn't want to waste so much time watching TV. I was trying to fight the addiction. So initially all I had was just the TV that came with the apartment, which I couldn't get rid of because it came with the apartment. And I thought, oh, I'm not going to watch it. But then of course I started watching it all the time. And at that time, and maybe this is still true, I don't know, but at that time, the TVs in Cambodia, most TV sets were equipped with a basic cable package, which had two primary English-speaking channels. One was called AXN, and one was called Star World. Now, neither of these were Cambodian channels. I believe they were based out of Singapore or Malaysia, and it would just broadcast to Southeast Asia. AXN was like the action channel, and Star World was like the more feminine channel, or the stuff that's, well, one channel tended to target men and one channel tended to target women, generally speaking. And they were both terrible, like absolute dreck. So the AXN stuff had on it like Hawaii Five-0, CSI, all the various CSI spin-offs. The Star World channel had on it stuff like Glee, or the Glee Project, which was like a reality show about people competing to be on Glee. It had the show called Jane by Design, which was about a high school student who was also a fashion designer. Just terrible, terrible stuff. And I watched it. I was always watching it just because I would come home from work and I would, I had all these books I was trying to get myself to read, but I just never felt like reading a book in the evening when I got home from work. And I would just turn on the TV to see what was on, and whatever junk that was on, I started watching it. I tried various tricks to get myself to stop watching the TV. Like I would bring the remote control to my desk at work and lock the remote control up in my work desk. Or I'd try to kind of unscrew the cables. I couldn't sabotage the TV completely because it was a rented apartment, so it was my landlord's TV. But I tried to what other tricks did I have? I tried to unhook the cables and take the cables to work so I couldn't watch TV. I was just trying all these tricks to stop myself from watching TV, but I was just addicted to watching that box no matter what junk was on. And that's part of the reason that I ended up just buying a DVD player in Cambodia. The DVD players are so cheap to buy in Cambodia. And then getting all those DVDs, which, as I've already mentioned, were so cheap in Cambodia. So, I don't know if anyone is judging me for watching all these pirated DVDs in Cambodia, but first of all, as I already said in the initial video, you couldn't buy legal DVDs even if you wanted to in Cambodia. There was nothing legal being sold. And two, I just couldn't help myself. I was watching so much Trek on these Star World and AXN channels. But anyways, on Star World, they would show How I Met Your Mother. And that was actually the one show on these two channels that I actually enjoyed watching. The other stuff I just watched because it was on and then hated myself for watching it. But How I Met Your Mother, I think it was on a couple times a day on Star World. So depending on if you were lucky and tuning in on the right times, you could watch a couple episodes. And I just really enjoyed it. I thought it was really inventive, funny, interesting. It was just a really fun sitcom. And so then once I finally did get a DVD player set up in my apartment, I started getting the box sets from the DVD stores and working my way through the various seasons. And, this is one of those TV series that everybody loves, and I don't have a lot of intelligent commentary that hasn't already been said, and to a certain extent it's really hard to comment on a comedy, other than to say, yeah, it was really funny, or, the jokes really worked. I mean, but yeah, it did definitely have its moments, and the jokes did definitely work, and the characters were really good, and the actors were really good. I mean, Jason Segel as Marshall was just a really funny character. Of course, Neil Patrick Harris as Barney Stimson was a really funny character. Ted Mosby could be annoying, but I think for the most part they did his character right, where he could also be really funny. Robin was great. Lily was great. The whole cast was really good. The show did quite often go into sap. So it was a little bit, I have a limited tolerance for kind of sappy stuff. And that did limit how much of the show I was able to intake at one time. So I didn't binge it all in one weekend like I did with Arrested Development or Parks and Recreation or something like that. I had to slow my intake of the show over a longer period because it was pretty sappy. But I did watch all 7 seasons, which there are 9 seasons, but 7 seasons were what was out at the time. I actually remember one time I was going to a friend's house I think we were going to watch a movie over at his place or something. And I got there, and How I Met Your Mother was playing on the television because everybody in Cambodia had the same two channels, Star World and AXN. And I said, oh, I was just watching this at my apartment. And my friend said, well, how did you get over here so fast, or something like that? The episode's just starting. And I said, oh, I was watching it on DVD. And he said, oh. He said, I just lost a little bit of respect for you. The implication being, I guess, that How I Met Your Mother was perfectly fine to watch if you were killing time and it happened to be on TV. But it was not something any self-respecting person would actively watch. Like, you wouldn't actively seek it out and buy the DVDs, especially when there are so many other viewing options available. And in Phnom Penh, there were so many other viewing options available. You could get so much stuff on DVD, which is one of the reasons I didn't stick around with half of these shows. I'm always talking about how I didn't finish the season or something like that with some of these shows. But How I Met Your Mother, I watched all 7 seasons that were out at the time. Yeah, found it pretty enjoyable. There were other little things that hooked me in. The characters were the same age as I was, meaning like in each year that the show was on, the characters would be a certain number of years old, and that would always match up with my age. With whatever the year was, so that they were aging at the same rate I was, going from their late 20s into their early 30s at the time. I identified with Ted Mosby and his, the guy who's kind of still single into his 30s and watching all his friends get married. And, wondering when he's going to meet the love of his life. That was my story into my 30s as well. During various seasons, they made use of George Harrison's music on the soundtrack. As a big George Harrison fan, I appreciated that. And then just all the zany humor. There was a lot of great humor in the show. That being said, though, for whatever reason, I never returned to seasons 8 and 9. And I can't really give you a good reason why I didn't do that. I guess the moment was past. After I had binge-watched seasons 1 to 7, I moved on to different things. I caught glimpses of season 8 and 9, again, because it was on TV in Cambodia through the Star World channel. Of course, all over the internet, everyone was complaining about season 9 and especially the terrible ending. So I definitely heard about that, but didn't actually watch the season myself. And at this point, certainly have no intention of going back to it. It's interesting. When I was living in Cambodia and teaching Cambodian students, the show seemed to be very popular among young Cambodian people. They would often say they would watch How I Met Your Mother to practice their English. And when I first moved over to Vietnam, initially I think people in Vietnam were still watching How I Met Your Mother to practice their English. It seems, though, in the past few years, that the show has not stayed popular with young people. I currently teach Vietnamese students who are about 18, 19 years old. And it's been a while since any of them have told me that they've been watching How I Met Your Mother. It seems like the show that they're watching to practice their English is Friends, which is a show that seems to have amazing staying power. Friends, of course, is much older than How I Met Your Mother. Somewhat older than How I Met Your Mother. I think especially overseas, people really like that show, and people really see that show as representing America, and people like watching that show to practice their English. It's been true in a number of countries I've lived in, but it did seem like for a time, at least in the countries I lived in with the students I was talking to, for a time, How I Met Your Mother was the go-to show. And now people seem to have forgotten about that and have gone back to Friends. So maybe Friends has had more staying power in the long run. Personally, though, I was never a huge fan of Friends. I was, of course, in high school when that show was at the height of its popularity, so I remember the cultural phenomenon well enough, but I don't know, the show wasn't terrible, it had its moments. How I Met Your Mother was a show I got much more into than Friends. I guess if there's a debate between How I Met Your Mother and Friends, I would be on team How I Met Your Mother, even though How I Met Your Mother could definitely get a little bit tiring at times when they were loading on the sap. But yeah, when that show was on, it was really on. It did have some brilliant moments.